Well, let me back out. We're in the midst of a midterm election cycle, and we know one of the attacks that has been pretty consistent is voting rights. Now, again, in the South, certain states have histories, like Alabama, like Georgia. And as we come upon this midterm election, I guess we would like to know what is the Biden-Harris administration doing more of to protect voting rights, particularly for black voters, but even for younger voters who feel like their vote is not being counted.
That's right. I'll mention a few things, and I'm going to start with this, just to pull back. So, as vice president, I have met with and talked with probably 80 times presidents, prime ministers, and kings of countries around the world. I've hosted them in my home, the official residence of the vice president. We hold ourselves as Americans out to be a model of a democracy. Flawed though we may be, imperfect though we may be. We walk into rooms around the world and we talk about the importance of the rule of law, human rights, dignity. Around the world, they are watching what we are doing. I've had these conversations where they are asking me, Madam Vice President, what's going on with voting in your country? What's going on with not allowing women to make decisions about their own body? They're asking these questions because you see, like everybody here is a role model. When you are a role model, people watch everything you do, and they look at you to see if what you say is reflected in what you do. So when we think about these issues like voting rights, do understand that it is as big as people standing in line and it not being illegal to give them food or water when they're standing in line to vote. It's as big as that as it is our standing in the world and our ability to defend democratic principles. So our president has rightly said that, look, there's this thing called the filibuster, and it can be and has been often used as an obstruction to getting good legislation passed. Our President Joe Biden has said he will not let the filibuster stand in the way of passing the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and the Freedom to Vote Act. He has also said he will not allow it to get in the way of passing the Women's Health Protection Act. So what do we need to do to actually then allow these pieces of legislation to get through? 109 days, we need to elect 2 more senators. 2. So that we can pass that federal legislation to deal with the fact that you've got these extremist so-called leaders in places like Georgia, Florida, Texas, who are intentionally trying to make it more difficult for people to vote so they don't vote. And here's the thing. Look at the recent history on this. Urban League leaders organized in the midst of a pandemic to achieve a goal which was achieved, which was in 2020, more people than ever before voted. More young people than ever before voted. Stood in line in the midst of a pandemic, did what they need, in the midst of trying to educate their kids at home, did what was necessary to vote. That scared a lot of people. Because, you see, when people voted, I'd like to think of voting as sometimes thinking of it as like people put it in an order, like this is what I want. So people voted because they said, I want an extension of the child tax credit. They got that, we did that. For the first year, we reduced child poverty in America by 40%, including child poverty among black children in America. People stood in line and they said, pass a tax cut for parents to help us pay for the cost of raising a child that includes food and medication and school supplies. So we passed that tax cut, where you can get up to, and parents get up to $8,000 more in their pockets because we got that done. Folks said, we want an administration that comes in that says Medicaid in the states should cover more than 2 months of postpartum care after a woman has given birth to another human being. Let's extend that to 12 months. That's happening. People put that order out and said that's what they wanted when they voted. And by the way, not one Republican since we came in office in the United States Senate voted for any of that. So people got what they wanted. People said, I'm going to stand in this line, but I want to see a black woman on the United States Supreme Court. And now there is Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson on the United States Supreme Court. And yet, and still, so-called extremist so-called leaders are passing laws to make it more difficult for people to vote. And we then have to do what we know how to do well and do best, which is in the face of intentional obstacles, we need to remind people that when they vote, they are, in essence, making a request, if not a righteous demand, for what they want to see from their elected leaders. And based on whether they put in that request and that demand through their vote, they will start to get those things. So that's how I think about this issue right now, especially, again, with 109 days to go, because there is so much on the ballot. And you look at it, whether going back to the issue you raised of choice, think about it, in certain states, they are criminalizing healthcare providers, punishing women. That law where there's basically allowing vigilantes turn in folks who exercise their rights. So why do these elections matter? Well, because who your DA is matters. Who your Secretary of State is on voting, that matters. Who your governor is matters. Who your mayor is certainly matters. Not to mention who are the members of Congress. There's so much at stake.
It truly is.